Okay, now on to um, looking at health considerations um, and ethnicity, um, and looking to explain why health outcomes across the board are far worse for those in the BAME groups, that's Black and Asian minority groups, um, and why this situation can be a very uh, cogent current topic for discussion, given the current situation with the coronavirus. I'm recording this on, I think it's the 13th of May, and as it stands at the moment, those in the BAME communities are suffering greater rates of infection and mortality through COVID-19 than the mainstay of the population. And although explanations for this will be revealed in the fullness of time, it is probably relevant to think of why, in fact, the rates are higher across the community with or without the coronavirus of mortality and morbidity. Okay, looking first at sickle cell anemia, which is a disease which primarily affects Afro-Caribbean groups. As we see from the slide here, it is related to hemoglobin, and there are a number, 12.5 to 15,000 people with this disease in the UK, and clearly it affects Black ethnic groups more than others. Diabetes seems to have a partial or prejudiced, if you like, effect on the population, with type 2 diabetes being 6 times more likely in people of South Asian descent, so India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, and 3 times more likely in African and Afro-Caribbean people. It's a clear indication that these biological factors are there. However, most sociological studies into this issue of the disparity in health outcomes for these groups reject this as a main or core reason for this happening. Sociologists, I think by their very nature, are going to look for societal causes rather than biological causes, but there is a strong argument put forward by many that these, if you like, are a blind alley, or at best and perhaps at worst, kind of a form of misanalysis or misjudgment in terms of understanding why the BAME community suffer greater levels of poor health than the mainstay community. For instance, their mortality rates are a massive 10% higher amongst women of those BAME ethnic groups than there is the white population. This is a significant number by any stretch of the imagination. And when it comes to reporting long-term or chronic illness, there are some figures that are stark. The Irish traveller population of over 65s, 69% report chronic illness. Of Pakistanis, or those of Pakistani descent, again, those over 65 report, 69% of them report chronic or ongoing illness. 64% of the Bangladeshi community. You compare that to 50% of the white community over 65 complaining of chronic illness, and you can see the difference in these figures. Mental health also has massive disparities. The Afro-Caribbean community are massively overrepresented in those that present themselves for mental health issues in the system. There are a number of different explanations for this. The prime explanation sociologists will put forward is, if you like, that these BAME groups are a subset of social class. If you think of the social class video, the Black Report that was worked through on a previous video, you can see that there is a massive difference from those in the lower strata of our social system, our social class system, and those at the top, given the fact that most of these ethnic groups of these ones in question, occupy that lower status in terms of socio-economic group. It is perhaps not surprising that they display greater levels of illness and higher levels of death rate. However, it has been pointed out by some sociologists that this isn't the whole picture, and that in a like-for-like study between those of a similar age, similar socio-economic background of the BAME community and the mainstream white community, there is still higher rates of more illness and death amongst these groups, the BAME groups. And sociologists point directly to the result of prejudice and discrimination and racism being affecting this group predominantly, and would explain these higher rates of ill health. Another explanation for propensity or the disproportionate amount of treatments being given, particularly to Afro-Caribbean males, is the way in which the criminal justice system interacts with them. If the idea of labeling, if you follow the videos we have put so far looking at agency and labeling theory, it would suggest that labeling is responsible for criminality and many other things, and what labeling represents is the prejudice of people in their way they look and interact with people, having a result in the outside world. In this case, and if you want to go and look at labeling theory, and you want to look at Becker, and you want to look at other issues, please do so, because it is very interesting. But in this specific case, it's the fact that the criminal justice system, the police and other services see particularly Afro-Caribbean youth as being a particular challenge to mainstream society. There are higher rates of arrest, prosecution and incarceration, massively disproportionate to the size of population for the Afro-Caribbean community. And in a similar way, in that the criminal justice system interacts with the health and social system, it is that sense that they are referred as trouble and having psychological issues, having mental health issues, and they are referred to the health service and are therefore disproportionately high numbers of people receiving this psychiatric treatment, if you can call it as such. they point out that through this referral through the criminal justice system and elsewhere, that there is a higher proportion of Afro-Caribbean youths, male youths, being submitted to mental institutions and particularly being physically restrained once they're in social institutions. This to sociologists, so certain sociologists, is a matter of looking at restraint and control and targeting an other group in which to do so.